What if I told you the promise of a predictable, worry-free retirement, the kind your parents trusted, was quietly swapped for a retirement system that shifted risk, shifted fees, and shifted wealth, mostly away from workers and into the pockets of corporations and Wall Street? This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's a story written in tax code, balance sheets, and retirement plan prospectuses, and it changed the future of millions of Americans. Tonight, we peel back the curtain on a decades-long transformation: pensions to 401ks, who benefited, who lost, and why the consequences are still rippling through households today. The Golden Age, and how it ended. Picture this. It's 1979. You work for a big factory or a telecom company. After decades of service, you retire with a defined benefit pension, a promise of steady monthly income for life. The company manages the investments, bears longevity risk, and guarantees your check arrives every month. For decades, this model formed the backbone of middle-class retirement security. Then something small and technical was inserted into the tax code, Section 401k, originally intended as a tax deferral device for executives and high-paid employees. No one predicted it would morph into the dominant model for private sector retirement. But over the next few decades, employers began shifting away from the heavy, unpredictable liability of pensions and toward defined contribution plans where employees shoulder the investment risk. That transition, sold as more control for workers, masked a structural transfer of risk from corporations to individuals. The numbers, scale, and consequence. Fast forward to today. Defined contribution plans, 401ks and similar, hold trillions of dollars. Retirement assets overall are massive, and mutual funds alone manage a great portion of assets held in 401ks. The system now anchors much of America's retirement wealth. The scale of assets under management in DC plans creates enormous revenue opportunities for asset managers and advisors. Yet for many workers, the reality is stark. Median balances for people approaching retirement remain worryingly low. Studies and analyses show median 401k balances for Americans in their 60s often land in the tens of thousands, not the hundreds of thousands you'd expect to fund a comfortable life. That gap forces retirees to rely on Social Security, part-time work, or dramatic lifestyle changes. Who won when pensions went away? Corporations. The first, most obvious winner was the employer. A pension is a long-term, legally binding liability sitting on a company's balance sheet. When markets crash, when life expectancy rises, the company must fund those promises. By freezing or closing pensions and offering 401ks instead, companies cut the volatility and expense of future payments, turning a hard actuarial obligation into a one-line expense, a matching contribution. The benefit to the corporation? Predictable, controllable costs, and often huge savings. In the 2000s, many large firms announced pension freezes. IBM, for instance, froze accruals for its DB plan in the mid-2000s and shifted new hires into DC arrangements, moves that project to save companies billions in obligations and funding volatility. For employers, switching to DC plans reduced the risk that a later market shock or longevity surprise would force painful contributions. Who won? When pensions went away, the financial industry. But corporations weren't the only winners. The financial services industry, fund managers, brokers, record keepers, and advisors, gained a new, hugely profitable distribution channel. Under pensions, a handful of large institutional investors managed pooled assets. Under 401ks, tens of millions of individual accounts became potential fee revenue streams. Fees that look small, 0.5% to 1.5% or more per year, compound dramatically over decades. Academic and policy research has repeatedly shown that small fee differences can shave tens or even hundreds of thousands of dollars off a retirement nest egg over a lifetime of compounding. That fee drain funnels enormous wealth from workers' accounts to the financial sector. Reports and analyses from independent researchers show fees are a structural drain on retirement savings, precisely because the DC model fragments assets and frequently leaves savers exposed to higher retail fees. The silent theft of compound growth. Let's make this visceral. Imagine two identical workers, Alice and Ben, both starting at 25, earning the same salary, saving the same percent of pay. Alice's money is in a low-cost institutional pension-like pool with 0.2% annual fees. Ben's is in a typical 401k menu, averaging 1.5% fees. Over 40 years, that 1.3% fee gap compounds relentlessly. Ben ends up hundreds of thousands of dollars poorer, purely because of fees. That difference is not small. It's life-changing. Fewer choices, later retirement, less security. Fees are not a product of markets. They are an extraction mechanism built into the DC model. Behavioral damage. The burden of choice. Beyond money, the 401k model shifted psychology. Under pensions, workers didn't have to be investors. Under 401ks, people suddenly had to choose funds, navigate target date funds, monitor markets, and resist panic during downturns. Behavioral research and painful historical episodes like the 2008 financial crisis shows how this plays out. Many participants watched balances plummet and then sold at the bottom, locking in losses. Others stopped contributing during recessions. Too many failed to roll over accounts into low-fee institutional options. The system assumes investors behave rationally, and they don't. That mismatch costs real dollars and real security. Winners versus losers. The inequality amplifier. The shift to DC plans didn't affect everyone equally. Higher-earning white-collar workers tend to have access to better plan menus and higher employer matches, contribute at higher rates and capture larger tax advantages, afford professional advice or to max out retirement accounts. Lower-wage workers often lack coverage or can't afford to contribute. The result? Retirement inequality widens. Top earners compound benefits and tax breaks. Lower earners see minimal accumulation and less safety net. This structural bias is baked into the DC system itself. Studies comparing replacement rates across countries show nations that retained robust DB plans or mandatory employer contributions, or both, have significantly higher retirement replacement rates and lower elderly poverty than the US. A few corporate case studies. IBM froze pension accruals in the 2000s and shifted significant retirement spending into DC mechanisms, saving the company billions and illustrating how corporate decisions reallocate retirement risk. Airlines and automakers, historically heavy with DB obligations, pared back pensions during the 1990s to 2000s, citing cost and competitiveness. Employees bore the long-term consequences. What this means for retirement security. The bottom line is stark. Millions of workers traded a promise for a product. They exchanged guaranteed, pooled lifetime income for individual accounts, subject to market cycles, fees, and behavioral pitfalls. The result is higher corporate balance sheet flexibility and a burgeoning fee economy, but lower and more precarious retirement security for many savers. Next, we'll dig into the remedies on the table, from strengthening Social Security and reintroducing hybrid pension models to mandating low-fee, collective DC options and improving fee transparency. We'll also explore what individuals can do right now to claw back lost ground. Make retirement collective again. One of the clearest ways to restore the advantages that pensions delivered is to pool risk at scale. That's the idea behind collective defined contribution, multi-employer pooled plans, and public-private pooled options. CDC plans let employers contribute to a shared pool and share longevity and investment risk across members, smoothing returns and enabling lifetime income. Countries like the Netherlands and Denmark already use risk pooling to deliver higher replacement rates. The UK has recently enabled CDC frameworks. That's a model worth watching. Pooling reduces fees, widens bargaining power with asset managers, and can provide more reliable retirement income than isolated 401k accounts. Mandatory employer contributions. Australia's superannuation system forces employers to contribute a fixed percentage of wages. The super guarantee rose to 12% as of July 1st, 2025, a schedule that gradually shifted the funding burden away from social programs and onto workplace savings. The result? Higher baseline retirement accumulation for most workers. Mandatory employer contributions don't need to be punitive. They simply change incentives so more retirement money is saved automatically. If the US or other countries adopted a modest mandatory employer contribution, even 5 to 8%, it would close a large gap between those who can afford to save and those who can't. It'd also reduce dependence on fragile Social Security alone. This is not just a finance problem, it's a social one. Retirement insecurity affects health, family stability, and the economy at large. The shift from pensions to 401ks was a choice, and change goes both ways. We can reinstate security without sacrificing flexibility, but it will take political courage, corporate responsibility, and informed citizens who demand better. If you want to push for real change, start here. Subscribe to Finance Facts for weekly, unfiltered breakdowns of the systems that shape your money and your life.